Welcome to Gone Phishing, a show diving into the cybersecurity threats that surround our highly connected lives. Every human is different. Every person has unique vulnerabilities that expose them to potentially successful social engineering. On this show, we'll discuss human vulnerability and how it relates to unique individuals. I'm Connor Swalm, CEO of FinSecurity, and welcome to Gone Phishing. Hey everyone, I am Connor, CEO at Fin, and welcome back to another episode of Gone Phishing. So today, we're going to talk about how you can apply human vulnerability management to your security awareness program. Now, if you haven't already, the previous episode we did was on the building blocks of running and creating a security awareness program, both how you could do that incorrectly and then how you can do that correctly. I'm going to reference that at least a few times now. So if you haven't watched the previous episode, please make sure you go do that. So, what is human vulnerability management? I've done a couple of episodes in the past about it, but I'm just going to give you a quick refresher. And actually, what I'm going to read for y'all is a pitch, a brief cliff notes, so to speak, of a speech that I'll be giving at a conference that's coming up soon. So point number one is that humans are bad at understanding how they are uniquely vulnerable to social engineering. It's very hard to recognize it a lot of the time. Two is security awareness programs are amazing. They're great. They're needed, but they're used by a lot to just check a box, and they don't do a ton at remediating the real risk of a person falling for social engineering and then having their money, information, and access stolen. Three is what is missing is an accurate picture of individual behavior and like their unique vulnerability, and then using that picture that we should be able to gather to deliver individualized training and individualized assessments that properly mimic the real world social engineering that they're going to recognize. And then fourth is basically a summary. We're bringing the framework that is assess, validate, prioritize, remediate, and verify to humans. So it's a common framework used in penetration tests and just understanding how software networks and hardware is vulnerable. And we're bringing that to humans. That's what we're trying to do. So that is human vulnerability management, is creating a program that hits all of those points. It's understanding what a human is uniquely vulnerable to and using that to craft an individualized educational experience for them. That is a combination of tests. It's a combination of videos. It's a combination of content followed by actual understanding of that content. So one thing that I always thought about when I was first building Fin was, why don't we actually find how people are vulnerable to social engineering? First, let's just say it's random at first. But once people start to latch on to or being vulnerable to certain forms of social engineering, whether that's appeals of authority, whether that's FOMO, whether that's urgency, whatever it is that is switching some kind of behavior in their brain, we should be able to recognize that at least in part once people start to interact with our phishing. And then after they've started to interact, what if we delivered more of that is crafted in a unique way to represent what that person's vulnerable to teach them to recognize it moving forward. And then so really what's what a lot of employees have told me is when they get phished, they'll just get a video that they've already seen 5 or 6 times and they mute it, they move it to their second monitor, and they move on with their day. A couple of things happen there. The employee failed a phishing assessment, and we could argue about what that really means, but they failed it. They were delivered training. The company paid for it. The company pays for that training to get delivered. And the employee didn't get any new information. There's no new behavior that employee is almost certainly going to actually show as a result of that. So what's really missing is this step-by-step walkthrough of, it's almost like a conversation. Like if I were sitting in front of a person, what I would want to say to them is, hey, we just discovered something that you're vulnerable to. It was the fact that if your boss emails you at 4 p.m. on a Thursday, you're probably going to get flustered or whatever it is. You're going to be in a mental state where you're likely to take whatever directed action is in that social engineering attempt. So let's uncover what it was this time. Okay, can you open up the sending information? Can you And I'm just going to use a few very common examples here because I don't have a fish in front of me that I'm actually looking at. But it's, can you open up the sending information? Can you hover over the attachments? Can you really see what the end result of this link is? Can you click on it? And can you go to the website? Can you verify that it's actually not only HTTPS connected, but also the actual domain name? Just because you have the little lock in the corner doesn't mean that your website's actually secure and you're not on a malicious website. A lot of people don't know that. So there's a lot of steps. There's a lot of diving into what happened that we can go through with this individual that I would want to do one-on-one, and that's just not feasible given how many people there are on the planet. And help them to recognize these are the unique ways you can recognize your own unique vulnerability. And we just discovered them together because we delivered you an assessment that tested you on these things, and you passed some and you failed others. So it's really simple. That is the end goal that I would like to bring with Finn, and that we're bringing into this world, is how can we help people recognize that they're uniquely vulnerable, and then having that one-on-one experience with them to teach them what happened and how they can prevent it. So why is it important that we do any of this? Security awareness training is checking a box. Programs, sometimes, if you listen to the last episode, you know that there are many, many companies that do this incredibly well. There are many practitioners in the space that are doing this well, that are great at what they do. And there are many companies that listen to them or have experts on staff where they do this very effectively. So what is the reason you should include this in your security programs? Well, if we for a second think about what is the end result of human vulnerability management, it is essentially that people are more inoculated against the social engineering that they're likely to face. And so I've brought this up on previous episodes. I'll bring it up again because it's a hot button topic. According to Verizon's Data Breach and Investigations report, something like 82% of breaches involve the human element. I'm not here to discuss the efficacy of not only, the data looked accurate, but the interpretation of that. But it's very clear that humans making mistakes, or humans doing something unintentional, or very complex individuals, is the reason that a lot of breaches happen, or that we're exposed to a lot of risk, is another way to put it. And so why would it be important to include actual vulnerability management, human vulnerability management in your program, is to simply reduce the risk that a breach occurs because a human made a mistake that resulted in the theft of information, access, or money. That's it. It's if we can actually materially reduce the risk, or even demonstrate in some way, shape, or form that we've reduced the risk that occurs en masse in a company, that is an incredible amount of not only cost saving, whether that's on a cyber insurance policy or on, I don't know, if you're setting aside money in the event that a breach occurs so you can not interrupt business, whatever it is, the cost savings is enormous, both from a time perspective of employees not having their work interrupted as a result of dealing with ransomware. I'm just throwing out random examples, but also the actual money that would save, the expected value of the cost of a breach times the likelihood it's going to occur goes way down. So what are a few practical steps? So we've talked about human vulnerability management, explained why it's super important that it needs to exist in your program. What are some practical steps you can take today to build it into your security awareness program? So in the previous episode, I went through a few things. The primary 4 things that I went through were some ways that I see programs measured incorrectly. So the first thing you can do to incorporate human vulnerability management into your awareness program is to begin measuring correctly. And I'm not going to dive into it completely, but basically, if the data that you're collecting does not actually show the full picture of what employees are vulnerable to and how they're vulnerable over time, you're missing information, and you should figure out how to collect that. I go into much greater detail in the previous episode about that, so I'd highly recommend you go take a look at it. But basically, you need to be collecting more information and then interpreting it correctly. The second is to, in some material way, properly represent the environment, that the social engineering environment that employees are going to experience. What I mean by that is, if you actually deliver more phishing assessments, more social engineering attempts, whether that's business email compromise scams, voicemail scams, USB dropping in the parking lot. What the goal of human vulnerability management is to expose people to reality, to teach them what they're vulnerable to before it becomes an actual problem. So that is the second thing you can do. And the third thing you can do is begin measuring the company's sentiment of the awareness training program in total. So the biggest disconnect I see between awareness training programs that are going well and awareness training programs that are not is, simply put, the employees are not bought in. There is this perceived or real, I'm not sure, and in some cases it differs, belief that the IT team, the security team, the IT people, whatever your company calls it, are in some way, rooting against the employees at a company. And there's this friction that's created between the IT folks and the employees that are not in IT. And so 2 things you can do, really, really simple things you can do, is your HR is probably conducting, random surveys. Add a couple questions on the awareness training program and the IT program in general about what do people really think about it. And the second is make sure the stakeholders at your organization are bought in and have told every employee that they're bought in. Just send an email saying, hey, this is super important for us this year. This is one of the things we're focused on. It's making sure we can continue to operate as a business by making sure everybody is properly inoculated against social engineering in our best estimates. Those are 2 things you can do to start to cut away at that divide if that exists. So those are that is why human vulnerability is important. Those are 3 really simple things you can do today to begin moving in that direction. And you'll start to see a lot of changes. I've seen a lot of changes in the companies that have either helped, worked with us to adopt some of that or come to us already doing that. And so I would highly recommend consider those 3 things. If you need any help or if you have any additional questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find our company. You can reach out to us. You can ask us questions. We're always willing to help you apply some of these principles in a little bit better way. Everyone's situation's unique. We're no stranger to that, but we can help you in a lot of ways. So thank you again for joining me. It is always my pleasure to help bring some of this education to you. And I will see you on our next episode. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in to Gone Phishing. If you want to find out more about high quality security awareness training campaigns, how to launch them in ways that actually engage employees to change their habits, then check us out, FinSecurity, at finsec.io. That's PHINSEC.io, or click all of the wonderful links in our show notes. Thanks for fishing with me today, and we'll see you next time.